The whistle of the train faded into the distance, leaving nothing but the eerie silence of the Montana night and the silhouette of Cora Montgomery slumped beside the railroad tracks. Blood still stained her skirts, and her arms ached with the phantom weight of the child she would never hold again. The miscarriage had come swift and merciless as the locomotive that had just abandoned her at her husband's command. Cora stared at the iron rails stretching endlessly in both directions, glinting silver in the moonlight. The year was 1878, and the Northern Pacific Railroad had carved its way through the wilderness, bringing with it settlers, opportunities, and in her case, unimaginable loss. Her husband Richard had been taking her east to his family's home in Minnesota when her pains had started. When it became clear she was losing their child, his disgust had been palpable. "Damaged goods," he had spat as the train stopped to take on water. "Stay here if you like. I'm continuing on." The conductor had protested weakly, but Richard's family name and money spoke louder than any sense of decency. The night air bit at her skin as she sat motionless, her thoughts as fractured as her heart. There was no settlement for miles, no hope of shelter, but Cora couldn't bring herself to care. The emptiness inside her matched the vast darkness surrounding her. Hours passed, marked only by the occasional hooting of an owl or the distant howl of a coyote. Cora's tears had dried on her cheeks, leaving salty trails like tiny riverbeds. She hadn't moved from her spot beside the tracks, a part of her hoping the next train would simply end her suffering. The sound of hoofbeats broke through her stupor. Slow, methodical, and growing louder with each passing second. Cora didn't bother to turn around. If it was death approaching on horseback, she would welcome it. "Madam," the voice was deep, cautious. "You hurt." A shadow fell over her as the rider dismounted. Boots crunched on gravel as he approached, stopping a respectful distance away. "Miss, you shouldn't be out here alone. It ain't safe." Finally, Cora tilted her head upward. The man stood tall against the starry sky, his features obscured by the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. A cowboy, by the look of him, with a worn duster and the unmistakable shape of a holstered revolver at his hip. "Does it matter?" Her voice was barely audible, raspy from crying. The cowboy crouched down, keeping his movements slow and deliberate like he was approaching a wounded animal. When he got closer, the moonlight revealed a face weathered by sun and wind, with kind eyes that seemed to hold a depth of understanding that belied his rough exterior. "The name's August Reed," he said softly, "and out here, everything matters. Especially a lady sitting alone by the railroad tracks in the middle of the night." Cora looked away, her hand instinctively moving to her empty womb. "My baby," she whispered. "I lost my baby, and then my husband left me here." August's jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. "I'm mighty sorry for your loss, madam." He settled down beside her, not too close, and removed his hat, placing it on his knee. "If you don't mind my company, I'll sit with you a while." "Why would you do that?" Cora asked, genuine confusion in her voice. "Because nobody should be alone in a time like this," he answered simply. And so they sat in silence as the night deepened around them. August occasionally adding small sticks to a tiny fire he'd built, not asking questions, not making demands. Just being present in a way Cora had never experienced before. As the first hints of dawn painted the eastern sky in pale pinks and golds, Cora finally spoke again. "My name is Cora Montgomery." August nodded. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Montgomery, though I wish it were under better circumstances." "It's just Miss now," she said with a bitter edge. "I suspect Richard will see to that as soon as he reaches civilization." The rising sun illuminated her fully for the first time, revealing the blood on her dress and the pallor of her skin. August's expression darkened momentarily before he stood, extending a hand toward her. "Miss Cora, there's a town called Willow Creek about half a day's ride from here. Got a doctor and a decent boarding house. Would you allow me to take you there?" Cora looked at his outstretched hand, rough and calloused from hard work. Part of her wanted to stay rooted to this spot where she'd lost everything. But something in August's steady gaze offered a lifeline she wasn't ready to refuse. "I have nowhere else to go," she admitted. "Sometimes nowhere is the best place to start over," August replied, his hand still extended. After a moment's hesitation, Cora placed her hand in his, allowing him to help her to her feet. The world swayed around her and she stumbled, weak from blood loss and grief. August caught her effortlessly. "Easy now," he murmured. "I've got you." Without asking permission, he lifted her into his arms and carried her to his horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding who watched them with intelligent eyes. "This is Samson," August said as he carefully placed her in the saddle. "He's got a gentle gait and plenty of sense." He swung up behind her, one arm securely around her waist to keep her steady. "Lean back if you need to rest. It's a few hours to Willow Creek." Cora's body betrayed her almost immediately, her exhaustion pulling her into a fitful sleep against the solid warmth of the cowboy's chest. Her last conscious thought was that for the first time since losing her baby, she didn't feel completely alone. August kept his horse at an easy pace, mindful of the woman sleeping against him. His thoughts were dark as he considered what kind of man would abandon his wife after such a tragedy. He'd seen many cruelties in his 32 years, but this struck him as particularly heartless. The sun climbed higher as they traversed the rolling grasslands. Occasionally, Cora would whimper in her sleep, and August would murmur soothing words, the kind he used to calm frightened horses. By midday, the scattered buildings of Willow Creek came into view. It wasn't much a main street with a general store, saloon, small church, and a handful of other businesses, but it represented safety and the promise of help. August guided Samson directly to a modest white building with a painted sign declaring it Dr. Walter Simmons, physician. He dismounted carefully, then lifted Cora down, concerned by how light she felt in his arms. The door opened before he could knock, revealing a middle-aged man with spectacles and rolled-up shirt sleeves. "August," the doctor nodded in greeting, his eyes quickly assessing the woman in the cowboy's arms. "Bring her in." "Found her by the tracks about 15 miles east," August explained as he carried Cora into the examination room. "She lost a baby. Husband abandoned her there. Doctor." Simmons's expression hardened briefly before his professional demeanor took over. "Put her on the table, then wait outside." August hesitated, feeling strangely reluctant to leave Cora with someone else, even the trusted doctor. "I'll take good care of her," Simmons assured him. "Go on over to Mrs. Daniels's boarding house and secure a room. The poor woman will need somewhere to recover." With a nod, August gently laid Cora on the examination table. Her eyes fluttered open momentarily, confusion and fear flickering across her face. "It's all right," he told her. "This is Dr. Simmons. He's going to help you. I'll be nearby." Recognition dawned in her eyes, followed by the faintest nod before they closed again. Outside, August stood on the doctor's porch for a long moment, staring at nothing in particular. He couldn't explain the powerful pull he felt toward this stranger's plight. Maybe it was because he'd seen too much suffering in the war, or maybe it was the quiet dignity she'd shown despite her devastating circumstances. With a deep breath, he headed toward the boarding house to arrange accommodations for Cora. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain: he wasn't going to abandon her the way her husband had. Mrs. Daniels, a plump widow with shrewd eyes and a kind heart, listened to August's abbreviated explanation with growing indignation. Left her by the tracks after losing a child. Lord have mercy, some men don't deserve the air they breathe, she declared, already bustling about preparing her best room. You did right bringing her here, August Reed. That poor dear will have proper care now. I'd like to settle her bill in advance, August said, reaching for the money pouch inside his vest. For 2 weeks. Mrs. Daniels paused in her preparations. That's generous of you. Do you know the lady well? No, madam, just met her last night. The older woman studied him thoughtfully. Then why are you going to such trouble? August shifted uncomfortably under her scrutiny. It's what anyone would do. No, Mrs. Daniels contradicted gently. It's not what anyone would do. It's what a good man does. She patted his arm. The room will be ready when the doctor releases her, and don't worry about payment just yet. August insisted on paying anyway, then returned to the doctor's office to wait. Hours passed as he sat on the porch, hat in hands, occasionally acknowledging townsfolk who passed by with curious glances. Finally, as the afternoon waned, Dr. Simmons emerged, wiping his hands on a clean towel. She's weak but stable, he reported. The miscarriage was complete, which is fortunate, means less risk of infection. Still, she'll need time to recover both physically and otherwise. Can I see her? August asked, standing quickly. The doctor gave him an appraising look. She's asking for you, though I can't say why she trusts a stranger so completely. Must be something about you, Reed. Inside, August found Cora propped up on pillows, her face still pale but clean now, her hair neatly braided. She wore a borrowed nightgown that emphasized her fragility. Miss Cora, he said, hat in hand as he approached the bedside. Doctor says you're doing better. Her smile was faint but genuine. Thanks to you, Mr. Reed. I don't know how to repay your kindness. No need for that, he replied, uncomfortable with her gratitude. I've arranged a room for you at the boarding house. Mrs. Daniels is a good woman. She'll look after you proper. Cora's eyes filled with tears. I have no money. My husband carried our funds. I have nothing but the clothes I wore. Don't fret about that now, August said firmly. You focus on getting well. The rest will sort itself out. Dr. Simmons entered with a small bottle of medicine. This should help with the pain. Take it with water, just a small spoonful when needed. He turned to August. She can be moved to the boarding house now if you'll help her. August nodded and carefully lifted Cora again, surprised when she wrapped her arms around his neck and rested her head against his shoulder without hesitation. The short walk to the boarding house drew curious stares from townsfolk, but August ignored them, focused only on delivering his charge safely to Mrs. Daniels's care. The boarding house room was simple but comfortable, with a clean bed, washstand, and a small vase of wildflowers that Mrs. Daniels had thoughtfully added. There now, the landlady said after August had settled Cora on the bed. You just rest, dear. I'll bring up some broth shortly. Dr. Simmons says you need to build your strength. When they were alone, Cora caught August's hand before he could leave. Will you be staying in town? The question caught him off guard. Truth was, he had planned to continue on to his small ranch 20 miles north after delivering some supplies to the general store yesterday. For a spell, he heard himself say. Got some business to attend to. Relief washed over her face. I'm glad. I'd like to thank you properly when I'm stronger. August nodded awkwardly. Get some rest now. I'll check on you tomorrow. That night, as he lay on his bedroll under the stars at the edge of town, having declined Mrs. Daniels's offer of a room, saying he preferred the open air, August found himself puzzling over the turn his life had taken. He'd been a solitary man since returning from the war 11 years ago, content with his small ranch and occasional work breaking horses for larger spreads. Human connections, especially with women, weren't something he sought out. Yet something about Cora Montgomery's quiet strength in the face of devastating loss had pierced the careful armor he'd built around himself. He told himself it was just basic human decency that compelled him to help her, nothing more. But as he drifted off to sleep, the memory of her trusting arms around his neck followed him into his dreams. The next morning, August woke with the dawn and rode into town after washing in a nearby creek. His first stop was the general store, where he selected several necessities. A woman might need a simple dress, undergarments, toiletries, and a warm shawl. The storekeeper's wife helped him choose appropriate items, her eyes twinkling with barely concealed curiosity about the mysterious woman everyone in town was talking about. August's next stop was the telegraph office, where he sent a message to the ranch hand who looked after his place, explaining his delayed return. Then he visited the doctor to inquire about Cora's continued care. "She's young and was healthy before this," Dr. Simmons assured him. "With proper rest and nourishment, her body will heal. The mind and heart may take longer." "And her husband?" August asked, his voice hardening. The doctor shook his head. "I've made inquiries. Man named Richard Montgomery from a wealthy Minnesota family. Railroad investors, I believe." "Not the sort you want to tangle with, August." "I'm not looking to tangle with anyone," August replied, though his clenched jaw suggested otherwise. "Just want to make sure she's protected." By mid-morning, he arrived at the boarding house with his purchases. Mrs. Daniels intercepted him in the hallway. "She had a rough night," the landlady informed him in a hushed voice. "Nightmares, calling out for her baby. I sat with her till dawn." August's heart clenched at the thought of Cora's continued suffering. "Should I come back later?" "No, she's awake now." "Been asking if you'd been by yet." Mrs. Daniels took the packages from his arms. "I'll put these in her room. She needs a friendly face more than new things at the moment." When August entered the room, Cora was sitting up in bed, staring out the window at the bustling Main Street below. She turned at his approach, and he was struck by how her simple presence seemed to transform the plain room. "Mr. Reed," she greeted him, her voice stronger than the previous day. "Miss Cora," he replied, removing his hat. "How are you feeling today?" "Better physically," she answered honestly. "The rest is complicated." August pulled a chair beside her bed and sat, placing his hat on his knee. "Mrs. Daniels said you had a difficult night." Cora's hands twisted the bedsheet. "I keep dreaming I can hear my baby crying, but I can't find her." Her voice broke. "I never even got to see if it was a boy or a girl. Richard wouldn't let me." August's hand moved instinctively to cover hers, stilling their restless movement. "I'm sorry you're suffering, Miss Cora." She looked down at their hands, his large and sun darkened against her smaller, paler ones. "Why are you being so kind to me, Mr. Reed? You don't know me." August considered her question carefully. "My ma raised me to believe we're put on this earth to help each other through the hard times. Simple as that." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was," he said quietly. "Lost her when I was 16. Fever took her in 3 days." Cora turned her hand beneath his, grasping his fingers. "I'm sorry for your loss." For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, connected by shared understanding of grief. "I brought you some things," August finally said, nodding toward the packages Mrs. Daniels had left on the dresser. "Nothing fancy, just necessities." Cora's eyes widened. "You didn't have to do that." "Wanted to," he replied simply. "There's a dress there. Thought you might feel better being able to get up and around when you're ready." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "There's no debt between us," August assured her, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Now Mrs. Daniels is fixing to bring you some proper food. Doctor says you need to eat to regain your strength." As if on cue, the landlady bustled in with a tray bearing a bowl of stew, fresh bread, and tea. "Here we are, dear. Nothing builds strength like a good beef stew." August stood to leave, but Cora's voice stopped him. "Would you? Would you stay a while longer? I've had quite enough of my own company." Something in her request made it impossible to refuse. "I could spare some time," he said, settling back into the chair. Over the next week, a routine developed. August would arrive mid-morning, often bringing small gifts, a book from the general store, wildflowers gathered from the prairie, or once, a delicate handkerchief embroidered by one of the local women. He would sit with Cora while she ate breakfast, telling her stories about ranch life or describing the surrounding countryside. As her strength returned, they would take short walks, first just around her room, then down the hallway, and finally outside to sit on the boarding house porch. During one such afternoon, as they watched the town's activities from their vantage point, Cora broached the subject they had both been avoiding. "I need to find work," she said suddenly. "I can't keep living on your charity." August frowned. "You're still recovering." "I'm well enough to be useful," she insisted. "I was a teacher before I married Richard. Perhaps the town needs an educator." "Willow Creek's too small for a proper school," August replied. "Most families teach their young'uns at home." Cora's shoulders slumped slightly. "Then perhaps I could work at the general store or as a seamstress. I have decent skills with a needle." August studied her determined expression, admiring her resilience. "Let me ask around, but there's no rush, Cora. Your recovery comes first." It was the first time he'd used her name without the formal miss, and they both noticed. A faint blush colored her cheeks, but she didn't correct him. That evening, August approached Mrs. Daniels about employment possibilities for Cora. The poor dear's eager to work already. The landlady asked. "She's barely on her feet. She's worried about being a burden," August explained. "Proud woman." Mrs. Daniels nodded thoughtfully. "Well, as it happens, I could use help around here. Cooking, cleaning, minding the books. My eyes aren't what they used to be for the small figures." She could work for room and board with a small wage besides. "That's mighty generous of you, madam." The older woman fixed him with a knowing look. "It's not entirely selfless. I'm not getting any younger, and this place is too much for one person. Besides, I've grown fond of her. She has quality, that one." August couldn't disagree. In their brief acquaintance, he'd come to respect Cora's quiet dignity and determination. Despite her terrible loss and betrayal, she never indulged in self-pity or bitterness. The next morning, when he shared Mrs. Daniels's offer, Cora's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "That would be perfect. I could stay somewhere familiar while I figure out my next steps." "What do you think those might be?" August asked, curious about her plans. Her expression grew thoughtful. "I don't know yet. I can't go back to my family in St. Louis. They opposed my marriage to Richard and made it clear I wasn't welcome if I defied them." She gave a small, sad laugh. "They were right about him, as it turns out." "You don't have to decide everything now," August reminded her gently. "No, but I do need to consider my future," she replied. "I'm 24 years old, left with nothing but the kindness of strangers in a town I never meant to visit." Something in her words struck August deeply. "Sometimes life's harshest turns lead us exactly where we need to be," he said quietly. Their eyes met, and for a breathless moment, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of connection that neither was ready to acknowledge. Cora was the first to look away. "When do you return to your ranch, Mr. Reed? You mentioned it was north of here." The question caught him off guard. He'd been extending his stay in town day by day, telling himself it was just to ensure Cora's well-being, but the truth was more complicated. "Soon, I expect," he answered vaguely. "Got animals to tend to, though my hand is capable enough." "I've kept you from your responsibilities," she said, regret coloring her voice. "No," he said firmly. "I've stayed because I wanted to." The simple honesty of his statement hung in the air between them, neither knowing quite how to respond to it. Mrs. Daniels's appearance saved them from the awkward moment. "If you're to be my assistant," she announced to Cora, "we should get you properly settled. I've moved your things to the small room off the kitchen. It's cozier than this guest room and more private too." As Cora prepared to move to her new quarters, August found himself facing a decision. There was no legitimate reason to remain in Willow Creek any longer. Cora was recovering well, had secured employment and lodging, and was beginning to make connections in the town. His presence was no longer necessary for her welfare. Yet the thought of riding away filled him with a strange hollowness he couldn't explain. Or perhaps he could, but wasn't ready to examine it too closely. "I'll check on my ranch tomorrow," he finally said as he helped carry Cora's few possessions to her new room. "Been away too long already, but I'll be back in a few days to see how you're settling in." Was it relief he saw flash across her face? "I would like that," she said simply. The next morning dawned clear and cool as August prepared Samson for the ride home. He was securing his saddlebags when he heard footsteps approaching. Cora stood a few feet away, wearing the simple blue dress he'd purchased for her hair neatly pinned up. She looked different, stronger, more present somehow. "I wanted to see you off," she said, holding out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "It's not much, just some bread and cheese, Mrs. Daniels helped me prepare for your journey." August accepted the package, their fingers brushing momentarily. "Thank you, it's thoughtful of you." An awkward silence fell between them, filled with words neither knew how to express. "Mr. Reed, August," Cora finally said, her voice soft but steady. "I don't know what would have happened to me if you hadn't found me that night. I might not have survived, and if I had, I wouldn't have wanted to." "Don't think on that," he said gruffly, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "But I must," she insisted. "You gave me more than just help. You gave me hope when I had none left." She reached out hesitantly, placing her hand on his arm. "I will never forget that." August covered her hand with his own. "You're stronger than you know, Cora Montgomery. You would have found your way with or without my interference." "Perhaps," she conceded with a small smile, "but I'm glad I didn't have to." With a gentle squeeze, she withdrew her hand and stepped back. "Safe travels, August. I'll look forward to your return." As he rode north toward his small ranch, August found himself replaying their farewell repeatedly in his mind. The feel of her hand on his arm, the subtle floral scent that seemed to surround her, the quiet strength in her eyes that had replaced the despair he'd first encountered. His ranch was a modest affair, a sturdy cabin, small barn, corral, and about 50 acres of decent grazing land. It wasn't much compared to the sprawling cattle operations further south, but it was his, paid for with years of hard work after the war. His ranch hand, a taciturn older man named Hank, greeted him with characteristic brevity. "Place still standing. Calves doing fine. Coffee's hot." Over that coffee, August filled Hank in on the bare details of why he'd been delayed. The older man listened without comment until August mentioned his plan to return to Willow Creek in a few days. "Seems you've taken quite an interest in this lady's welfare," Hank observed mildly. August stiffened. "Just being neighborly." "Neighborly," Hank repeated, the ghost of a smile playing at his lips. "Well, I reckon I can mind things here if you need to be neighborly a while longer." August busied himself with ranch work over the next 2 days, fixing fence lines, checking on his small herd, and repairing a leak in the cabin roof. But his thoughts continually drifted back to Willow Creek and the woman who had unexpectedly entered his life. On the third morning, he was surprised to see a rider approaching from the direction of town. It was young Billy Thompson, the general store owner's son who sometimes delivered messages. "Mr. Reed," the boy called out as he dismounted. "Got a telegram for you from the station." August tipped him a coin and unfolded the paper with a sense of foreboding. Montgomery arrived Willow Creek stop seeking wife stop claims doctor stole baby stop situation, volatile stop Simmons August's blood ran cold. He'd known men like Richard Montgomery during the war entitled, vindictive men who couldn't stand to lose face or control. The fact that he'd tracked Cora to Willow Creek and was spreading vicious lies about the doctor suggested a dangerous determination. Bad news. Hank asked, noting August's expression. "Need to get back to town," August replied, already striding toward the barn. "Trouble brewing." 20 minutes later, he was galloping south, pushing Sampson harder than he normally would. Fear for Cora's safety drove him, along with a simmering anger at the man who had already caused her so much pain. The ride that normally took 3 hours he completed in just under 2. Sampson's coat dark with sweat as they thundered into Willow Creek's Main Street. The scene outside the boarding house confirmed his worst fears. A fancy carriage stood out front, its matched bay horses stamping impatiently. A cluster of townsfolk had gathered, watching the building with concerned expressions. As August dismounted, Dr. Simmons hurried toward him. "Thank God you're here," the physician said. "Montgomery showed up this morning demanding to see his wife. Mrs. Daniels refused to let him in, so he's gone to the sheriff claiming she was kidnapped and that I stole their baby's body for medical purposes." "Where's Cora now?" August demanded. "Inside with Mrs. Daniels. Montgomery's at the sheriff's office, but he'll be back with legal authority if we don't do something." August handed Sampson's reins to a bystander. "See to my horse, please." Without waiting for a response, he strode toward the boarding house doctor. Simmons hurrying alongside. "Sheriff Hollister is a reasonable man," the doctor continued, "but Montgomery's flashing money around and dropping names of powerful connections. I'm worried he might get his way." August's jaw tightened. "No one's forcing Cora to go anywhere against her will." "Not while I'm breathing." Inside the boarding house, he found Mrs. Daniels standing guard at the foot of the stairs like a mother hen protecting her chicks. "August Reed, thank the Lord," she exclaimed upon seeing him. "That horrible man is trying to drag Cora away. Says all sorts of awful things about her mental state, claiming she abandoned their child's remains by the tracks in her delusion." "Where is she?" August asked. "In her room. Poor thing's terrified he'll force her to return with him." The landlady wrung her hands. "He's threatening to have me arrested for harboring his unstable wife." "Let me see her," August requested. Mrs. Daniels nodded and led him to Cora's room, knocking gently before opening the door. "Cora, dear, August is here." The room was dim, curtains drawn against the bright day outside. Cora sat in a chair by the window, her face pale but composed. When she saw August, something like relief washed over her features. "You came," she said simply. "Of course I came," he replied, crossing to her side and kneeling beside her chair. "Are you all right?" "He found me," she whispered, fear evident in her voice. "He's telling everyone I'm mad with grief, that I abandoned our baby's body, that I need to be institutionalized for my own good." August took her trembling hands in his. "Listen to me, Cora. I won't let him take you anywhere you don't want to go. Do you understand?" She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "He's a powerful man, August. His family has connections all across the territory." "I don't care if he's friends with the president himself," August stated firmly. "This is about what you want, no one else. Before she could respond, the sound of raised voices came from downstairs, followed by heavy footsteps on the stairs. "That'll be the sheriff," Mrs. Daniels said. "And Montgomery, too, no doubt." August stood, positioning himself between Cora and the door. "Stay behind me," he told her quietly. The door opened to reveal Sheriff Hollister, a weathered man with a silver star pinned to his vest, and beside him, a well-dressed gentleman whose cold eyes and rigid posture radiated controlled fury. "Mr. Reed," the sheriff acknowledged with a nod. "Didn't know you were acquainted with Mrs. Montgomery here." "It's Miss Cora to me," August replied evenly. "And yes, we're well acquainted." Richard Montgomery stepped forward, his gaze moving contemptuously over August before fixing on Cora. "There you are, my dear. I've been frantic with worry. The doctor assured me your condition is temporary, brought on by the trauma of losing our child." His voice was smooth, cultured, and utterly false to August's ears. Cora stood, moving to August's side rather than behind him. "I'm not going with you, Richard." Montgomery's mask of concern slipped momentarily, revealing a flash of anger before he composed himself. "Darling, you're not thinking clearly. These people have filled your head with nonsense while you were vulnerable." "The only nonsense is what you're spouting," August cut in, his patience wearing thin. "You abandoned her by the railroad tracks after she lost your child, left her to die alone." Montgomery's eyes narrowed. "And who are you to interfere in a private matter between husband and wife?" "Some local cowhand who thinks he's found a distressed damsel." "He's the man who saved my life," Cora said, her voice stronger now. "Which is more than I can say for my husband, who told me I was damaged goods before ordering the train to continue without me." Sheriff Hollister cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mr. Montgomery claims you were distraught, madam, that you insisted on staying behind with the remains." "That's a lie," Cora stated flatly. "Our baby's body was taken by the conductor to be properly buried at the next station. Richard knew that. He left me because he couldn't bear the sight of me after I failed to give him his air." Montgomery's facade cracked further. "You're hysterical, Cora. Just as you were that night. The doctor in Minneapolis is expecting us. He specializes in female hysteria and nervous conditions." "She's not going anywhere she doesn't want to," August said, his hand instinctively moving toward his holstered revolver. The sheriff noticed the movement. "Easy now, Reed. No need for things to escalate." He turned to Montgomery. "Sir, do you have any documentation of your wife's condition? A doctor's assessment, perhaps?" "I have a letter from Dr. Harrington in Minneapolis," Montgomery replied, producing a folded document from his jacket. "He's treated my wife previously for nervous complaints." August watched as Cora's face drained of color. "That's not true," she protested. "I've never had nervous complaints. Richard took me to that doctor once because I questioned his gambling debts. The doctor prescribed bed rest and laudanum to keep me compliant." Dr. Simmons, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "Sheriff, as the physician who treated Miss Cora upon her arrival, I can attest that she shows no signs of hysteria or mental instability. She suffered a miscarriage and was abandoned by her husband in a remote location. Her recovery has been remarkable given the circumstances." Sheriff Hollister looked increasingly uncomfortable as he glanced between the parties. "This is a complicated situation. Perhaps we should continue this discussion at my office." "There's nothing to discuss," Cora interrupted, her voice steady despite her evident fear. "I am not returning with Richard. Our marriage is over." Montgomery's careful composure finally shattered. "You have no choice in the matter," he snarled. "You're my wife, and you will do as I say." He lunged forward, grabbing Cora's arm roughly. August moved with the speed of a striking snake, seizing Montgomery's wrist and twisting until the man released his grip with a yelp of pain. "Don't touch her again," August warned, his voice deadly quiet. The sheriff moved between them. "That's enough, Mr. Montgomery. I won't have violence in my town, no matter how well connected you claim to be." "This man assaulted me," Montgomery protested, cradling his wrist. "After you put hands on your wife," Sheriff Hollister pointed out. "Now I suggest we all calm down, and I want a divorce," Cora announced clearly. Her words fell into a sudden silence. Even August looked at her in surprise. Montgomery recovered first, laughing incredulously. "A divorce? On what grounds, pray tell? No court will grant it without cause." "Abandonment," Dr. Simmons suggested. "Cruelty. I documented her condition when she arrived. The evidence of both is quite clear." "And I have witnesses," Cora added. "The conductor saw you order the train to leave without me. And Dr. Simmons can testify to my physical state when I arrived." Montgomery's face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful, careful," August warned, stepping closer to Cora. The sheriff raised his hands placatingly. "Mr. Montgomery, I suggest you return to your hotel and consult with a lawyer if you wish to contest your wife's intentions. For now, I see no legal reason to remove Mrs. Montgomery from her current residence against her will." "This isn't over," Montgomery hissed, glaring at Cora and then at August. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, Cowboy." "Neither do you," August replied evenly. After Montgomery stormed out, followed by the sheriff, Mrs. Daniels exhaled loudly. "Well, I haven't seen such dramatics since the traveling theater company came through last spring, Dr." Simmons shook his head. "Montgomery won't give up easily. Men like him can't stand to lose, especially publicly." "What do we do now?" Cora asked, sinking back into her chair as the adrenaline drained from her system. August knelt beside her again. "We fight. If you're certain a divorce is what you want." "It is," she said without hesitation. "I should never have married him. I thought I loved him once, but now I see it was the idea of him I loved, the cultured businessman who promised me the world." She looked down at her hands. "I was blinded by pretty words and didn't see the cruelty beneath them." "Then we'll get you that divorce," August promised. "I know a good lawyer in Helena who specializes in such cases. Helped a friend of mine a few years back." "I can't afford a lawyer," Cora reminded him. "Let me worry about that," August said. "For now, you should stay inside, away from Montgomery. I don't trust him not to try something desperate." Dr. Simmons nodded in agreement. "I'll spread the word around town. People here are good folks, they'll keep an eye out," as the doctor and Mrs. Daniels left to make arrangements. Cora reached for August's hand. "Why are you doing all this for me? Still just being neighborly?" August met her gaze directly. "No," he admitted quietly, "not just that." Color rose in Cora's cheeks. "What then?" "I'm not sure I can explain it," he said honestly. "From the moment I found you by those tracks, something changed for me. It's like I'd been sleepwalking through life and suddenly woke up." "I know what you mean," she whispered. "When you sat with me that night, waiting for sunrise. No one had ever shown me such simple kindness before. No expectations, no demands, just presence." Their eyes held, a current of understanding flowing between them that needed no words. August cleared his throat, suddenly aware of how close they were. "I should check on my horse, then see about sending a telegram to that lawyer." "Will you come back?" Cora asked, vulnerability showing through her brave facade. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away," he promised. The next few days passed in a tense standoff. Richard Montgomery remained in town, taking a room at the hotel, and making his presence known throughout Willow Creek. He made no further direct attempts to approach Cora, but instead engaged in a whispering campaign. subtly implying to anyone who would listen that his wife was mentally unstable and that the local doctor and boarding house owner were taking advantage of her condition. August divided his time between staying at Cora's side and making arrangements for her legal representation. He sent telegrams to the lawyer in Helena, who agreed to travel to Willow Creek to meet with Cora. Despite Montgomery's efforts, the townspeople largely rallied around Cora. Those who had seen her arrive weak, bloodied, and clearly abandoned were not swayed by her husband's smooth talking or hints of financial reward for information about her strange behavior. Mrs. Daniels became particularly protective, refusing to leave Cora alone for even short periods, and arming herself with a formidable rolling pin that she kept within reach at all times. "I'd like to see that fancy man try something in my house," the landlady declared. "He'd get more than he bargained for." On the third night after Montgomery's arrival, August was keeping watch from the small parlor of the boarding house when he heard a soft footfall on the stairs. Looking up, he saw Cora descending, wrapped in a shawl over her nightgown. "Couldn't sleep," she explained, pausing on the bottom step. "May I join you?" "Of course," he replied, rising to his feet. She settled on the sofa beside him, closer than propriety might dictate, but August found he didn't mind. The quiet intimacy of the moment, the crackling fire, the soft ticking of the mantel clock, the faint scent of lavender that seemed to follow Cora everywhere created a cocoon of warmth around them. "The lawyer arrives tomorrow," August said, breaking the comfortable silence. Cora nodded. "I'm nervous about what happens after. Divorced women aren't exactly welcomed in polite society." "You care much for polite society?" August asked. A small smile curved her lips. "Not as much as I once did. Recent events have rather changed my perspective on what matters." "And what does matter to you now?" he asked softly. Cora turned to face him fully. "Honesty, kindness, courage, the sort of strength that doesn't need to dominate others to prove itself." Her eyes held his steadily. "The kind of man who would sit with a stranger until sunrise just because she shouldn't be alone." August's heart hammered in his chest. "Cora, I know it's too soon," she interrupted gently. "I'm still legally married, still recovering from loss. But I want you to know that whatever happens with the divorce, whatever comes next, meeting you has changed me too." Without thinking, August reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered, tracing the curve of her cheek. "When I found you that night, I was just doing what any decent man would do," he said quietly. "But now I think perhaps it was something more, like we were meant to find each other." Cora leaned into his touch. "Do you believe in such things, fate, providence?" "I didn't used to," he admitted. "The war beat most of that out of me, but lately I've been reconsidering." Their faces were close now, drawn together like magnets. August knew he should pull away. She was vulnerable, still married. The situation complicated beyond measure, but the pull between them felt elemental, beyond conscious choice. The sudden pounding on the front door shattered the moment like glass. August was on his feet instantly, hand moving to his revolver. "Stay back," he warned Cora, moving toward the door. "Reed, it's Sheriff Hollister. Open up." August unbolted the door to find the sheriff on the porch, looking grim. "What's happened?" August demanded. "Montgomery's gone," the sheriff reported. "Left on the evening train. But before he did, he filed charges against you for assault and against Dr. Simmons for medical malpractice. Says he's going to bring back federal marshals." Cora gasped behind him. "Can he do that?" Sheriff Hollister removed his hat. "Madam, with his connections, he can cause a heap of trouble, even if the charges don't ultimately stick. And there's more, he's petitioning a judge in Helena to have you committed to an asylum based on that doctor's letter." August's blood ran cold. He'd heard stories of women being committed to such places on the most spurious grounds, with little hope of release once the doors closed behind them. "When will these marshals arrive?" he asked. 3 days, maybe 4, the sheriff estimated. Montgomery took the eastbound train, but he'll telegraph ahead. Nearest marshals are in Helena, I reckon. August turned to Cora, whose face had gone pale. "Pack your things," he said decisively. "Only what you can carry in a saddlebag." "What are you thinking, Reed?" the sheriff asked warily. "Taking her somewhere safe until the lawyer can sort this out," August replied. "If Montgomery gets his hands on her before the divorce petition is filed, she'll disappear into some asylum, and that'll be the end of it." Sheriff Hollister looked troubled. "What you're suggesting could be construed as kidnapping a married woman." "It's not kidnapping if I go willingly," Cora pointed out, her voice steadier than August expected. "And I am going willingly." The sheriff sighed heavily. "I didn't hear any of this. As far as I know, Mrs. Montgomery left town of her own accord before I could deliver any legal papers." "Understood." August clasped the man's shoulder gratefully. "Thank you, Sheriff." "Don't thank me yet," Hollister replied grimly. "Just get her somewhere safe and let that lawyer of yours work his magic." Montgomery strikes me as a man who doesn't give up easily, especially when his pride's been wounded. Within the hour, August had Cora mounted on a sturdy mare borrowed from the livery, with minimal possessions packed in saddlebags. Mrs. Daniels provided food for the journey and tearfully embraced Cora before they departed. "You come back when it's safe, you hear," the landlady insisted. "Your position will be waiting for you." Dr. Simmons met them at the edge of town, handing August a sealed letter. "Medical documentation of her condition when she arrived," he explained. "And my professional opinion regarding her mental fitness should help with the legal proceedings." Under cover of darkness, they rode north, avoiding the main trails. August led them through terrain he knew well, winding creek beds, forgotten game trails, and narrow passes that even experienced trackers might overlook. Cora rode silently beside him, her face determined despite the strain of the journey. When August glanced her way, concerned she might be overtaxing her still recovering body, she met his gaze with resolute eyes that bolstered his confidence in their escape. They reached his ranch shortly before dawn, the small cabin a welcome sight after the tense journey. Hank emerged from the bunkhouse, raising an eyebrow at their arrival but asking no questions as he took their horses. "Got coffee brewing," was all he said. "Figured you might be coming back in a hurry." Inside the cabin, August quickly built up the fire while Cora sank into a chair, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "It's not much," he said apologetically, gesturing around the simple but clean interior. "But it's secure. Montgomery doesn't know about this place." "It's perfect," Cora replied sincerely. "I feel safe here." The word warmed August more than the growing fire. "You are safe here, I promise." As dawn broke over the eastern hills, casting golden light through the cabin windows, August prepared a simple breakfast while Cora freshened up, using the basin of water he'd provided. When she emerged from the small bedroom where he'd insisted she rest, her hair was neatly braided and her face washed, though shadows of fatigue still lingered beneath her eyes. "The lawyer should arrive in Willow Creek today," August said as they ate. "Mrs. Daniels will direct him to Dr. Simmons, who knows where to find us." Cora nodded, cradling her coffee cup. "And if Montgomery returns with marshals before then, they'll find no trace of you in town," August assured her. "And no one there will betray your whereabouts. Folks in Willow Creek take care of their own." "Am I one of their own?" she asked with a small smile. "I've only been there a few weeks." "You became one of us the moment you showed your courage," August replied simply. "Small towns respect that. Over the next 2 days, they settled into an unexpected domesticity. August taught Cora about ranch operations, showing her how to feed the chickens and collect eggs, explaining the cycle of cattle breeding and grazing rotation. She proved an eager student, absorbing information quickly and asking insightful questions. In the evenings, they sat before the fire, talking long into the night. August shared stories of his childhood in Missouri, his harrowing experiences during the war, and his journey west afterward seeking peace and purpose. Cora told him about growing up in St. Louis, her brief teaching career, and the whirlwind courtship with Richard that had seemed so romantic until the harsh realities of marriage to a controlling man became clear. "I was such a fool," she said on the second night, staring into the flames. "There were warning signs I chose to ignore." The way he spoke to servants, his impatience when I expressed opinions different from his, how quickly his charm would vanish when we were alone. "You weren't a fool," August contradicted gently. "You were young and hopeful. There's no shame in that. When I lost the baby." Cora's voice faltered. "A part of me was heartbroken, but another part felt relief. What kind of mother feels relief at losing her child?" August moved from his chair to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. One who knew, deep down, that bringing a child into an unhappy home would only compound the suffering. "Your feelings were honest, Cora. Never fault yourself for honesty." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I wanted children so badly, still do, but not like that. Not with him." Without thinking, August reached up to brush away her tears. "You'll have that chance again, with a man who deserves you." Their eyes locked, and the air between them seemed to vibrate with unspoken possibilities. August was acutely aware of her closeness, the softness of her skin beneath his fingertips, the slight parting of her lips as she drew in a breath. The moment broke when Hank's warning whistle sounded from outside their agreed signal that riders were approaching. August was instantly alert, moving to the window with his rifle in hand. "Stay back," he told Cora, peering cautiously through the curtains. To his relief, he recognized Dr. Simmons riding alongside a distinguished-looking gentleman he assumed was the lawyer from Helena. A third rider, to his surprise, was Sheriff Hollister. "It's friends," he assured Cora, setting down the rifle and opening the door to greet their visitors. The lawyer, Charles Blackwood, was a serious man with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense manner. After introductions were made and coffee served, he laid out the situation plainly. "Montgomery has indeed returned with a federal marshal," he confirmed. "They're searching Willow Creek and the surrounding area. The commitment papers for the asylum are genuine, I'm afraid, though obtained through questionable means." Cora's hand trembled slightly as she set down her cup. "So he could legally have me committed?" "Currently, yes," Blackwood acknowledged. "However, I've already filed divorce proceedings on your behalf, citing abandonment and cruelty. I've also petitioned to have the commitment order suspended pending review of Dr. Simmons's medical testimony." "Will that be enough?" August asked. The lawyer exchanged glances with Sheriff Hollister. "Ordinarily, I would say the legal process would protect Mrs. Montgomery, but her husband has considerable influence and seems determined to assert control by any means necessary. He's bribing officials," the sheriff added bluntly, "offering rewards for information, making threats. The marshal with him seems more like a hired gun than a lawman." Dr. Simmons leaned forward. "We need to get Cora to Helena, where Judge Thornton can hear her testimony directly. He's known for his fairness and integrity, not the sort to be swayed by Montgomery's money or connections." "When?" August asked. "Tomorrow," Blackwood replied. "I've arranged for a private hearing. If the judge rules in Cora's favor, he can issue an immediate injunction against the commitment order and fast-track the divorce proceedings. Cora took a deep breath. Then we'll go to Helena. Not by the main roads, Sheriff Hollister cautioned. Montgomery's men are watching them. You'll need to take the old mining trail through the high country. August nodded grimly. I know it. Rough going, but passable this time of year. I'll accompany you, the sheriff offered. Give this whole thing an air of legal propriety. The plan was set. They would leave before dawn, taking the treacherous mountain route to Helena, a journey of about 60 miles that would normally take 2 days, but might be completed in one with hard riding. That night, after their visitors had departed to make their own preparations, August found Cora standing on the porch, gazing at the star-filled sky. Nervous about tomorrow, he asked, joining her. Terrified, she admitted, but also hopeful. For the first time in a long while, I can see a future that might hold joy again. August's heart swelled at her words. You deserve that joy, Cora. She turned to face him, moonlight silvering her features. Whatever happens in Helena, I want you to know these days here have been precious to me. You've shown me what it means to be truly cared for, truly respected. Cora, August began, his voice rough with emotion. I know the timing is all wrong, she continued, stepping closer. I'm still legally bound to another man. We've known each other such a short time, but Her voice faltered. August reached for her then, unable to deny the pull between them any longer. His hands framed her face gently, as if she were made of the finest porcelain. Nothing about us has followed the usual order of things, he said softly. Maybe that's as it should be. When their lips finally met, it felt to August like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but deepened as Cora's arms wound around his neck, drawing him closer. When they finally parted, both breathless, August rested his forehead against hers. I've been falling in love with you since that night by the tracks, he confessed. I just didn't know what to call it until now. Tears shimmered in Cora's eyes. I think perhaps I've been doing the same. They stood together under the vast Montana sky, holding each other as if they could ward off the uncertainties of tomorrow through sheer force of will. The journey to Helena proved every bit as challenging as anticipated. They left in the pre-dawn darkness, Cora riding the gentle mare, August on Samson, and Sheriff Hollister on his reliable gray gelding. The old mining trail wound through steep terrain, crossing rockslides and narrow ledges that required careful navigation. By midday, storm clouds were gathering over the mountains, promising a difficult afternoon. They pushed on, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and eat a cold meal from their saddlebags. How much farther? Cora asked, her face showing the strain of the difficult ride despite her determination not to complain. About 20 miles, August estimated, scanning the darkening sky with concern. But that storm's moving fast. We might need to find shelter if it hits before we reach Helena. Sheriff Hollister nodded in agreement. There's an old line shack about 5 miles ahead, used by the stage company before the railroad came through. Might be our best option if the weather turns. They remounted and continued, the trail growing steeper and more treacherous. The first fat raindrops began to fall just as they crested a ridge, the valley beyond obscured by sheets of driving rain and the occasional flash of lightning. The shack, Hollister shouted over the rising wind, pointing toward a barely visible structure nestled against the hillside ahead. They urged their horses forward, reaching the abandoned building just as the storm unleashed its full fury. Inside, the shack was dusty but sound, its roof intact enough to keep out the worst of the rain. We'll have to wait it out, August said, helping Cora dismount. She was soaked through, and shivering despite the heavy coat he'd insisted she wear. Sheriff Hollister busied himself with the horses while August quickly built a fire in the small stone hearth, grateful to find dry kindling stacked nearby. "Come get warm," he urged Cora, guiding her to sit beside the growing flames. He draped his own coat around her shoulders for additional warmth. "Will this delay cause problems for the hearing?" she asked, teeth chattering. "Blackwood will explain," Hollister assured her, joining them by the fire. "Judge Thornton is a reasonable man. He won't let Montgomery win by default just because we're delayed by weather." As darkness fell, the storm showed no signs of abating. They made a simple meal from their provisions and settled in for the night, Sheriff Hollister taking the first watch while August spread blankets near the fire for Cora. "Try to rest," he told her. "Tomorrow will be challenging enough." Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Cora. August could see her eyes reflecting the firelight as she stared upward at the rough-hewn ceiling. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly, sitting beside her. "Everything that's brought me to this point," she replied. "A year ago, I was a new bride, certain I knew what my life would be. Now I'm running from my husband, sleeping in an abandoned shack, about to beg a judge for my freedom." She gave a small, wondering laugh. "And somehow, despite everything, I feel more alive than I ever have before." August took her hand, twining their fingers together. "Life has a way of surprising us, not always pleasantly, but sometimes the hardest trails lead to the most beautiful views." Cora squeezed his hand. "Is that cowboy philosophy?" "Just something my pa used to say," August smiled. "He was a wise man in his way." They fell silent, listening to the storm raging outside and the occasional pop from the fire. Eventually, Cora's eyes grew heavy, and she drifted off to sleep, still holding August's hand. He watched over her until Sheriff Hollister approached to relieve him for the second watch. "You care deeply for her," the sheriff observed quietly. August didn't deny it. "More than I thought possible." "Montgomery won't give her up easily," Hollister warned. "Men like him consider wives property, not partners." "She's not his to give up anymore," August replied with quiet determination. "She's made her choice." The sheriff nodded thoughtfully. "Just be prepared for a fight, and not just in the courthouse." By morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a washed, clean world glistening in the early sunlight. They set out immediately, pushing their horses as fast as the still muddy trail would allow. Helena came into view by early afternoon, its buildings spreading across the valley floor like scattered building blocks. The territorial capital was significantly larger than Willow Creek, boasting proper streets, substantial buildings, and all the trappings of civilization that came with being Montana's seat of government. They rode directly to the courthouse, a dignified brick structure in the center of town. Charles Blackwood was waiting anxiously on the steps, relief washing over his face as he spotted them. "Thank God," the lawyer exclaimed. "Montgomery's been here since yesterday, trying to convince the judge to rule in his absence. Thornton gave us until 3 o'clock today." A courthouse clock showed it was just past 2. They had arrived with barely an hour to spare. "Is there time for Cora to change?" August asked, noting her travel-stained appearance. "No," Blackwood said firmly. "Her condition after this difficult journey actually works in our favor, shows the length she's willing to go to escape her husband's control." Inside the courthouse, they were directed to a small hearing room where Judge Thornton, a silver-haired man with piercing blue eyes, was already seated. Richard Montgomery sat at one table with a slick-looking lawyer, while Blackwood led Cora to the opposite table. August and Sheriff Hollister took seats directly behind her, a silent wall of support. As the proceedings began, Montgomery's lawyer presented their case first, painting Cora as a fragile, mentally unstable woman devastated by the loss of her child and influenced by provincial characters who had taken advantage of her vulnerable state. Montgomery himself testified with practiced sincerity about his concern for his beloved wife's deteriorating condition and his determination to get her the best care available at the prestigious Lakewood Asylum in Minnesota. Throughout his testimony, Cora sat straight-backed and composed, though August could see the tension in her shoulders and the white-knuckled grip she maintained on her handkerchief. When it was Cora's turn to speak, she rose steadily and approached the judge's bench. In a clear, unwavering voice, she recounted the truth of her marriage, Richard's controlling behavior, his emotional cruelty, and finally, his abandonment of her after she miscarried their child. "I am not mentally unsound, Your Honor," she concluded. "I am a woman seeking freedom from a man who sees me as property rather than a person. I ask only for the right to determine my own future." Judge Thornton listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions but offering no hint of his leanings. Dr. Simmons testified next, presenting his medical documentation of Cora's physical condition upon her arrival in Willow Creek and his professional assessment of her mental state. "In my 30 years of medical practice," the doctor stated firmly, "I have found Mrs. Montgomery to be of exceptionally sound mind, displaying remarkable resilience and clarity of thought, despite the trauma she endured." Sheriff Hollister provided his own testimony about the events in Willow Creek, including Montgomery's threatening behavior and attempts to bribe officials. Throughout the proceedings, Montgomery's face grew increasingly stormy, his lawyer's objections more strident. But Judge Thornton maintained firm control of his courtroom, allowing each side to present their case fully. Finally, after all testimony had been given, the judge called a brief recess to consider his ruling. The tension in the small room was palpable as they awaited his return. August leaned forward to squeeze Cora's shoulder reassuringly. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "I'm with you." She reached up to cover his hand with her own, drawing strength from his touch. When Judge Thornton returned, his expression was solemn but determined. "Having reviewed the evidence and testimony presented," he began, "I find compelling reason to believe that Mrs. Montgomery is of sound mind and that the commitment order was obtained under false pretenses. I therefore suspend said order pending a full investigation." Cora's shoulders sagged with relief, but the judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I find sufficient grounds for Mrs. Montgomery's petition for divorce. Given the unusual circumstances and evidence of potential danger, I am granting a temporary decree of separation, effective immediately, which prohibits Mr. Montgomery from approaching or contacting his wife in any way until the divorce proceedings are completed." Montgomery surged to his feet. "This is outrageous. You can't sit down, Mr. Montgomery," the judge commanded sharply. "One more outburst and I'll have you removed from my courtroom." Montgomery subsided, his face contorted with barely controlled rage. "Mrs. Montgomery will remain under the protection of the territorial court until the final divorce decree is issued," Judge Thornton continued. "Sheriff Hollister, I'm deputizing you officially as her protective escort until you return to your jurisdiction." The judge struck his gavel. "This hearing is adjourned. Full divorce proceedings will commence in 30 days' time." Outside the courthouse, Cora practically collapsed with relief, August's steadying arm around her waist all that kept her upright. "It's over," she breathed. "I'm free." "Not completely yet," Blackwood cautioned, "but the hardest part is done. The final divorce decree is now virtually assured." Sheriff Hollister was more pragmatic. We should leave Helena immediately. Montgomery looked murderous in there. August nodded in agreement. We'll take different routes back. Harder to track that way. They made arrangements to meet Blackwood in Willow Creek in a month's time for the final divorce proceedings. Then, with Sheriff Hollister providing official escort, they set out from Helena by a different trail than the one they'd arrived on. The journey back was less hurried but no less watchful. They camped one night in a secluded grove, taking turns standing guard. By midday of the second day, they crested the final ridge overlooking Willow Creek, the small town nestled peacefully in the valley below. "Almost home," August said, then caught himself, glancing at Cora. "I mean, almost to town." Cora smiled up at him, understanding in her eyes. "It does feel like coming home, doesn't it?" Their return caused quite a stir in Willow Creek. Mrs. Daniels tearfully embraced Cora, while Dr. Simmons beamed with satisfaction at the outcome of the hearing. The sheriff made a point of publicly announcing the judge's protective order, ensuring everyone in town understood that Cora was under the law's protection. For the next month, life settled into a new pattern. Cora resumed her work at the boarding house, while August divided his time between his ranch and town, never staying away more than a day or two. Their relationship blossomed in the open now, no longer constrained by uncertainty about her future. They took long walks along the creek that gave the town its name, enjoyed Sunday dinners with Dr. Simmons and Mrs. Daniels, and spent quiet evenings on the boarding house porch, talking about everything and nothing. August found himself opening up to Cora in ways he never had with anyone else, sharing hopes and fears he'd kept buried since the war. She, in turn, confided her dreams of perhaps teaching again someday, or perhaps running a small business of her own. What kind of business? He asked one evening as they sat watching the sunset. "I've always loved books," she replied thoughtfully. "Willow Creek has no proper bookshop. Perhaps something small to start ordering titles for those who want them, maybe eventually a lending library of sorts." August smiled, imagining her surrounded by books, helping to bring knowledge and stories to the growing community. "I think you'd be wonderful at that." As the day approached for the final divorce hearing, there was no word or sign of Richard Montgomery. Sheriff Hollister made inquiries and learned that he had returned to Minnesota, apparently giving up his pursuit of Cora in favor of salvaging his reputation. "Don't let your guard down completely," the sheriff advised. "Men like that can nurse a grudge for years." But when Charles Blackwood arrived from Helena with the final divorce papers, Montgomery was nowhere to be seen. The proceedings were brief and straightforward, the judge's decree officially ending Cora's marriage and restoring her maiden name of Cora Bennett. That evening, the boarding house hosted a small celebration. Mrs. Daniels prepared a special dinner. Dr. Simmons brought his finest bottle of brandy, and even Sheriff Hollister unbent enough to propose a toast to Cora's new beginning. As the night drew to a close, August walked Cora to the small garden behind the boarding house where they could speak privately. "How does it feel?" he asked softly. "Being Cora Bennett again, strange," she admitted. "Wonderful, a little frightening. Like I've been given a blank page to write a completely new story." August took both her hands in his. "I've been thinking about that story, if you don't mind me saying." Cora's eyes softened in the lantern light. "Have you now?" "I know it's soon," he said carefully. "You've only just gained your freedom. The last thing you need is another man making claims on your future." "August Raid," she said with gentle firmness, "you are nothing like Richard. Nothing. You've never tried to control me or make decisions for me. You've only ever supported my choices." Encouraged by her words, August continued, "My ranch isn't much compared to what you might have had with Montgomery. The cabin's small, the work is hard, and the winters are long. Are you trying to talk me out of something I haven't even been asked yet? Cora teased, a smile playing at her lips. August laughed softly. I'm making a mess of this. He took a deep breath. What I'm trying to say is, I love you, Cora Bennett. I think I've loved you since that night by the railroad tracks, and if you'll have me, I'd be honored to share whatever future comes our way. Tears glistened in Cora's eyes, but her smile was radiant. Are you asking me to marry you, August Reed? I am, he confirmed, his heart pounding. Not right away if you need time, but someday when you're ready. Cora stepped closer, her hands moving to frame his face. I don't need time to know what my heart already understands. Yes, I'll marry you. And I don't want to wait. Their kiss sealed the promise, tender and full of hope for the future they would build together. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, a simple ceremony in the small Willow Creek church. Mrs. Daniels bustled about like a mother of the bride, insisting on baking the wedding cake herself. Dr. Simmons gave Cora away, while Sheriff Hollister stood as August's best man. Cora wore a dress of pale blue silk, her one extravagance, ordered specially from Helena with wildflowers in her hair instead of a formal veil. August, unaccustomed to formal attire, nonetheless cut a handsome figure in a new suit, his usually unruly hair tamed for the occasion. The whole town turned out for the celebration afterward, with music and dancing continuing well into the night. It was, everyone agreed, the most joyful event Willow Creek had seen in many years. As August and Cora rode toward his ranch, their ranch now under a canopy of stars, he marveled at the twists of fate that had brought them together. "What are you thinking about, husband?" Cora asked, the new title making his heart swell with pride. "About that night I found you," he replied honestly. "How close I came to taking a different trail, how easily we might never have met." Cora's hand found his in the darkness. "But you didn't. You found me when I needed you most. I like to think that wasn't just chance." "Maybe not," August agreed, thinking of all the seemingly random choices that had led him to that precise spot at that precise moment. "Maybe some things are meant to be, no matter what." The cabin welcomed them with the warm glow of lamps that Hank had thoughtfully lit before making himself scarce to give the newlyweds privacy. August lifted Cora from her horse and carried her across the threshold, both of them laughing at the old tradition. Inside, the simple space had been transformed. Fresh curtains hung at the windows, a colorful quilt covered the bed, and a small bookshelf, August's wedding gift to Cora, stood ready to receive the volumes she would collect for her future shop. "Welcome home, Mrs. Reed," he said softly, setting her on her feet but keeping his arms around her. Cora's eyes shone with happiness as she looked up at him. "Home," she repeated. "I like the sound of that." In the years that followed, Willow Creek grew and prospered, as did the Reed Ranch. August's careful management expanded their holdings, while Cora's dream of a bookshop became reality, a small but thriving establishment that became the cultural heart of the community. 2 years after their wedding, Cora gave birth to a daughter they named Hope, followed 2 years later by a son they called Daniel. The children grew strong and happy, surrounded by the love of their parents and the extended family they'd found in the townspeople who had stood by them in their darkest hours. Richard Montgomery never returned to Willow Creek, though they heard occasional news of him through business connections. He remarried, a wealthy widow from Boston, and seemed content to forget his brief connection to Montana territory. On the 5th anniversary of the night August found Cora by the railroad tracks, they rode out together at dusk, leaving the children in Mrs. Daniels's capable care. They followed the tracks east to a spot that looked much like any other stretch of the endless rails. "You think this is the place?" Cora asked, dismounting from her horse. "Close enough," August replied, joining her on the ground. Hard to be sure after all this time. They stood side by side, watching as the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and gold. "I never thought I could be this happy again," Cora said softly. "That night I wanted to die. I'd lost my baby, my husband had abandoned me, and I couldn't see any future worth living for." August slipped his arm around her waist, drawing her close against his side. "And now," Cora smiled up at him, her face radiant in the sunset light, "now I understand that endings can also be beginnings. That sometimes we have to lose everything to find what we truly need." As darkness fell around them, they remained by the tracks, watching as the stars appeared one by one in the vast Montana sky. Just as they had on that fateful night, they sat together until sunrise, not in grief this time, but in celebration of the life and love they had found together. And as the first golden rays of dawn broke over the eastern hills, August kissed his wife tenderly, both of them silently acknowledging the journey that had brought them to this moment, a journey that had begun in despair beside these very tracks, but had led to a joy neither could have imagined on that dark night 5 years before. "Ready to go home?" August asked as the new day brightened around them. Cora nodded, her hand finding his. "Home," she agreed, "the best word in the English language." Hand in hand, they walked back to their horses, leaving behind the tracks that had once represented Cora's lowest moment, but now served as a reminder of how a single act of kindness, a cowboy sitting with a stranger, until sunrise had changed both their lives forever.